as I mentioned before, we've got Nick's going to be moderating this AI, RWAs, and next-gen layer ones, all the narratives you need to be across for 2025. Over to you, Nick.
Perfect. As you gave a brief introduction before, but we'll go around the table here. We've got Pat, a product marketing manager at Crypto Tax Calculator. Then we have Joni over at BADASL, crypto lawyer. And then we have Ray, there is head of marketing there at CoinSpot. So welcome everyone. Keen to get into this discussion, considering how big 2024 was, and 2025 hopefully is only going to be bigger and better, for better or for worse. So perhaps the first question I'd love to get into, and maybe I can point to you, Ray, is why is, I guess, narrative so important, especially for consumers to be paying attention to? We don't really have, any sound fundamentals to look at in the space, so it's all narrative, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I think narratives, even if we look to traditional markets of like stocks and stuff like that, there's obviously so many in the marketplace that are focusing on different niches and different industries. And I think narratives is another thing when you look at crypto that follows that same path. We're looking at this emerging tech and all these different projects that are working on different things. So I think it's really important to focus on the narratives that you like, whether that's about AI or tracking or different sorts of software. There's all these things that I think can kind of be, overwhelming at times, but when you focus in on what interests you, I think that's where you get the best results.
Spoken about AI, you get a good plug from Ben, Pat, talking about you're the man to go to talk about AI coins. AI is such a big narrative in the space. NVIDIA, the space is still pretty immature, in my opinion. We see NVIDIA do anything, OpenAI release, a new model, and crypto tokens tend to move higher as people look for that kind of de facto exposure in their crypto portfolios. What are you really looking at in the AI space? Is it like AI memes? Is it, infrastructure like a BitTensor who are trying to create the foundations for, practical goods and services in the on-chain world? What sort of stuff are you looking at there?
Yeah, great question. First of all, just want to say, obviously, AI is like this transformative technology that's, really taken over mindshare over the past sort of couple of years, and in crypto, especially the past couple of months. And what we've seen with AI agents sort of taking over the Twitter timeline has been, absolutely incredible, actually, to sort of see that intersection actually evolve into something that's quite tangible and sort of feels a lot more real than it has for a long time. In terms of what I'm looking at in the sort of AI, this sort of intersection between AI and crypto, I like to break it down into sort of different components of the tech stack. So we've kind of got this resource layer, which is at the bottom. That's things like compute marketplaces and data. And then we've sort of got this middleware section, which is, composed of, projects like BitTensor, coordination layers like Allura, that sort of thing. Like you mentioned, a few other sort of like protocols working on different models, bringing them on chain. And then at the top, we've got the application layer. And these are things like, agents or agentic protocols and that sort of stuff. Recently, the hype has definitely been around agents. And I think a lot of that's due to it being very tangible. Obviously, we've been seeing, agents posting on the timeline, making calls, releasing AI albums even, or AI generated artwork, like from Sciberras. And now these things are trading above a 1 ETH floor, which is just absolutely insane to see. So the focus has been around agents, which is at this top layer. But I think there's going to be, a lot of love coming to these other sections. So the middleware layer and the resource layer, which are, I guess a lot more fundamentally driven. And some of them are definitely starting to move as we're seeing like the adoption pick up, like compute marketplaces, seeing a lot of adoption over the past year as well. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be excited about, and I wouldn't say that the only thing to be looking at is meme coins. There's definitely more fundamental sort of infrastructure plays that are definitely very interesting.
And I guess Ray, over at CoinSpot, is that similar? What you're seeing with, I guess, consumers that are wanting to demand like exposure to these AI narratives, or are we in a bubble ourselves and thinking that more people care about it than they actually do.
No, I definitely agree. I think the AI, especially over the last, kind of 2 years, what Pat was saying is very true. Like we're seeing that across our industry for sure. I mean, we offer bundles on CoinSpot, and we have an AI bundle, and I believe that was the top trending bundle across the last 12 months, which definitely goes to show that, the average consumer, when they're looking in this space, there's definitely an intersection between crypto and AI, and they're excited by that. You see the chat GBT in your day-to-day life online on the news and things like that. And then you tie that into crypto and go, okay, well, are these things both going to kind of go at the same time? Are they both going to be emerging, in sync? So I think that is definitely something, we've noticed over here for sure.
I feel like we could actually speak about AI and AI coins for a while here. Perhaps at the end as well, we can get back to it. But another narrative I'm really watching is, I guess, the Trump narrative. We all know the crypto market moves so much higher on the election win for Donald Trump. Maybe heading to you, Joni, are we kind of overestimating the importance on a practical level, I guess? There's a lot of hopium going on that maybe he's going to make more changes than he can realistically do. I saw today that I think they're confirming a new SEC chair. Is that the biggest change that's going to be happening in this, shift in the US?
Well, thanks for having me. And I don't think so. I think we'll see a lot of change and a lot of announcements under Trump, and we're already seeing some of those come into effect. But a lot has been said. There is still to be done. And a lot of my global crypto lawyer chats have been 90% flooded with who the replacement SEC chair is going to be. But not just them, the leadership team that surrounds Trump and various of the regulatory agencies, because it's, even though a leader is good, a crypto-friendly leader is good, there's still so many other stakeholders across regulators and government and policy think tanks, and even traditional finance incumbents, the big banks and the likes of JP Morgan and BlackRock, that those are really important influencers to also swing to crypto-friendly regulation. So it looks positive, but we'll see what's implemented. And if I could just say that, of course, the crypto lawyer, none of what I say is financial or legal advice today. So please don't rely on it and get your own advice. And I can make a couple of comments on AI if we're there now, or if we get to it in a later question.
Yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on that intersection, because it's only going to be growing in the coming years. Even when I'm speaking to friends, family, AI is such a buzzword out there, and it's actually starting to get a lot more well known. With people before, maybe a couple of years ago, you talk about AI and it probably would go over people's heads, or you think you're a bit kooky. But now we got practical things that people use every day. So yeah, we'd love to hear your insight on the AI narrative heading into next year.
Yeah, sure. So I do run my own crypto specialist law firm, but over the past year, I've had a side venture where I'm building a crypto legal AI tool. And so as a result of working heavily with experienced developers in this space, my first observation is all of the tools and the compute power and the various providers in my AI stack, and I've changed it a couple of times because this is evolving all very quickly. None of those providers have an associated token to their model. They've all raised equity in a traditional format, often Silicon Valley based and backed. And the AI is hard. Like it seems easy in that it's out of the box and that we've got an agentic agent there for whatever task that we might need. But actually building it and having it work reliably and consistently is not easy. So a lot of us building in AI, the AI product is enough of a challenge, and managing a token and a freely circulating token in a global market and a community, if there are governance attached to that token, a token and a community are separate products in their own right and complexity to manage. So I would just say the things that I'm actually using and the providers that I'm interacting with have not launched a token, or at least not yet. So I would be very skeptical. And it's not to take away of what the AI related tokens are doing. It's just I haven't necessarily engaged with them yet, and so can't attest to the accuracy or how well they're doing with whatever they're building associated with AI. So just take that level of skepticism as well.
Yeah, that's probably going to be the thing I'm looking forward to in the market. I'm perfectly expecting probably valuations to get absolutely astronomical, and people probably pricing in a lot of hope for these tokens. But as even our chief product officer, chief operating officer here at Collective Shift, Bergs, he always says that building crypto is hard, and then building AI is hard, and doing them both together, as you just said, is probably people far underestimate that task at hand. So keen for that narrative heading into next year. But probably looking outside of AI now, are there any narratives, maybe Ray, that you're looking at in the market, probably underappreciated maybe, that isn't as talked about, that could really catch a win next year?
Yeah, for sure. I would say probably things to do with like our real world use. A lot of the times when we're talking about this emerging tech, we're focusing on these really big picture things, and there's these buzzwords that get thrown around. But when you're speaking to the average person, they don't understand how it's going to impact their lives positively. So I think things around like authentication, even if it's related to AI, even if it's, like the AI content we see on a day-to-day basis now, some of it's really bad, but some of it's kind of getting good. And, there's people online on social media every single day interacting with that and going, is this real? Is this not real? And it's going to get harder and harder as the years go on. So I think we'll see some focus on, authentication of content, and being able to really distinguish what's real and what's not. Because I think if we don't get that right, and we kind of bypass it and focus on all these other flashy things, the things that actually impact us on a day-to-day basis could have some real negative repercussions, if there's not some proper oversight over them.
Yeah, that probably brings us back to WorldCoin. So they're building WorldChain, which is being built by OpenAI founder, co-created by Sam Altman. That actually kind of answers some of the questions that you probably raised as well. They're really trying to create a platform excluding bots, AIs, where we can have more trusted content, and an area to come where we don't have to worry about that video being a deep fake, or any misinformation going on. So that's one that I'm actually really looking at in the AI world. It's just a pity, I think it launched with such a high, fully diluted valuation that I think scared a lot of people in the market when it was day one worth, I think, like $40+ billion. What about DeepIn? Is DeepIn something that you guys are kind of across? Because we're talking about real world application here, and DeepIn has been one of the core pillars of actually trying to create non-speculative value in the sector. I'm not sure if that's something that you guys are following.
I can take this. I mean, DeepIn ties in quite nicely to the AI stack and beyond. So like obviously we have these compute marketplaces like Akash and Render, and some newer ones that are more focused on like AI, decentralized AI training and that sort of thing, and the use of token, crypto economic incentives or just tokens to basically align people around a common goal. So contributing compute to a marketplace in order to earn some tokens, in order to sort of bootstrap the supply side of the network. Obviously, like that's a very key novel use case of crypto. Like if you go back to what Bitcoin is, like ultimately Bitcoin is literally using token incentives to incentivize people all to contribute compute towards securing this sort of network. So I think DeepIn is definitely really interesting. And if you look at infrastructure networks in the real world, some of these are just massive monopolies that are just ripe for disruption. And especially with the likes of compute marketplaces, which are just one example of DeepIn. There's many different examples, but the likes of Akash and that sort of thing are just seeing incredible usage growth. And after years and years of bootstrapping this supply side using token incentives, now we're actually seeing the demand come, and this sort of marketplace flywheel can actually start to really churn. And I think we could see some upside in these deep in tokens if the token incentives are aligned and the tokenomics kind of work for the model.
Anyway, maybe Ray, I'm not sure on the CoinSpot level, you talk about bundles. Is the deep in bundle something that gets traction, or is it too hard of a narrative to kind of wrap your head around? And for those playing at home, if you don't know, deep in stands for decentralized physical infrastructure networks.
So I don't actually believe, and I could be wrong, the guys on the product team could get mad at me, but I don't believe we have a straight bundle focused on that. But just to kind of echo the stuff that Pat was saying, I definitely think it is something that is probably a more underrated narrative, but it is kind of a buzzword that we are seeing thrown around a lot, and definitely hearing more of it in the last 12 months than previous years for sure.
I'm not sure if
maybe if I can add something to that too. One of the most difficult things is GPUs, and having them running 24/7 is expensive right now. And one of the most difficult problems is just-in-time access to affordable GPUs, and not even the centralized providers. There's just not enough centralized providers that have enough GPUs available right now. And even when they are, it sort of takes 5 minutes to spin it up when you load in a 90 billion point large language model. So the user experience means that you kind of want to have the GPUs reserved for you and being used 24/7, so that the users are not having that 5 minute or more spin up time and spin down time. But if you leave it to just in time, then there might not be GPUs available. So if there can be that coordination problem solved by crypto economic incentives, then I'm all for it. Like, that would be fantastic, especially if it added pressure to the pricing of GPUs and when you have them on and when you have them available. That is a narrative that I hope gets more attention, and I hope that gets solved.
Yeah, that's probably one of the most exciting things I just love to see in the market. You don't see this raw speculation in the deep in sector. It's actually fundamental goods and services that probably weren't made possible otherwise. As you said, you've got to probably go through a centralized provider, which has its own hassles with it. More non-speculative applications of this stuff, I only think is hopefully can bring to market, especially as people are no longer afraid maybe to bring products to market, especially in the US with a more favorable environment. So a lot on the horizon, I think. Another key one here is layer one blockchains and your so-called next-gen blockchains by the likes of Sui, Aptos. We're going to see a few launches such as Monad and Berachain coming in the next few months into 2025. I'm not sure who is the layer one favorite here on this panel, but anyone that has any strong opinions on that layer one, is it just as simple as everyone's going to be chasing the next Sol, the next Sui? Everyone just loves a new layer one that they maybe missed out on, and that narrative is pretty powerful in the market.
Yeah, I can add a couple of thoughts here. I think like the introduction of novel new layer ones is definitely something that's very interesting. Obviously, like we've seen, I feel like the market's sort of got a bit of fatigue at this point in terms of like copy and paste chains. And I don't see copy and paste chains really attracting that much attention, even if they are, offering some sort of like airdrop incentive, that sort of thing. We've sort of seen that that demand really die out. But more novel layer ones, like the next gen layer ones that you're referring to in terms of like Berachain, which has got this proof of liquidity sort of a novel consensus mechanism, which sounds pretty crazy when you start putting it down on paper and what it could mean and what sort of protocols could be built on top of it. I think that sort of thing could drive, a lot of speculative demand and drive a lot of capital over onto that new layer one just to sort of test it out and see what sort of novel Ponzonomics that they can get involved in. So I think, that sort of thing is definitely of interest to me and something I'll be following really closely.
Just to add to what Pat said as well, I 100% agree. I think the market's getting smarter the more cycles we go through, and the longer people are around, and they're not looking for just copy and paste chains. That they want to kind of see what projects are actually working on things that is going to impact them or that they understand. So I think that's what we're going to see from a lot of these layer ones, the ones that are focusing on, real world things and actually building stuff rather than just adding the word AI into their description and just trying to follow a trend. I think those are the ones that we're going to see making moves for sure.
Yeah, and to echo what Pat and Ray have said, as a crypto lawyer, I'm seeing stuff come through the pipeline that hasn't been announced to the market yet, and all under the buzzword of the next gen L1s. And at a high level, all I would say is any sort of new feature that is introduced is trading off something that has already been experimented with. And has either worked successfully or not worked successfully. So that trade-off is untested to a global extent. And so I wouldn't just look at the white paper or the reviews in terms of what the new feature is, but I would try to dig deeper to see, well, what would buckle if it was stress tested in this new blockchain or this new L1 environment that is not necessarily possible because of the features that may have been disadvantages of the other blockchain or protocols on that layer one. So again, be very be very critical and try to scenario test what could go wrong in the new environment.
That actually hit the kind of next question that we're actually going to look at, which was looking at kind of warning signs with the hype cycle that happens. We see, as you said, buzzwords, narratives get thrown around, especially in bull markets. You might have a case of trying to disguise a project with malicious means, maybe with a lot of these highly technical terms to try to maybe seem more sophisticated than it really is. Maybe from your perspective, from the lawyer perspective of seeing everything that's been out there in the market and even probably the pitfalls some people fall into, is there anything that people can watch out for, really, or take steps to try and get out of that hype cycle and narrative issues that people can really get stuck in?
Yeah, well, I mean, usually when projects come across my desk, the language is so fanciful and so sensationalized because for any new L1 or new protocol to get traction, you've got to be making these big statements that grab the attention. But any lawyer would typically say, what is truthful to say about this thing? What is the status of it right now? And there's always this tension between marketing versus legal, and I would say that those projects that they may not have as much sensationalized language, but they're plain, factual, to the point, not a lot of fluff. Those ones have probably had the benefit of a legal review and every due diligence, but I see it as a kind of red flag. The more flashy red lights and fancy language there is, probably hasn't had the benefit of a legal review, probably has a team behind it that doesn't have a culture of safety. Like I wouldn't even say culture of legal and culture of compliance, but just being truthful to their users and to organically grow their community with a foundation of trust. So the founders that truly believe in their product, from a legal perspective, we do tend to get good traction to move them to the more factual, plain marketing, at least on the website. So use that in the back of your mind as you're looking through these projects and what will really stick around for the medium to long term, not just a hype cycle.
Well said. That's one thing we try and stress to our members, because we find so many occasions that people get roped into I think crypto TikTok and hear all these new projects and all these buzzwords. Very easy when everything's going up to try to allocate and get caught up in this mess. But a lot of wise words there. Maybe the final question I've got before we head to Q&A is, I guess, real world assets. We've kind of talked about real world assets in a way because deep in these things can have physical forms. Big narrative, this year especially, was RWAs. Do we anticipate that to continue into next year, or is this kind of an older narrative, I guess, considering that interest rates may start to really come down in the next couple of years, which may lose, I guess, the appeal of using on-chain treasuries when that interest rate is dwindling I'm not sure who wants to take this one.
I can comment on this, and then maybe the others can add some info. But I think looking at it just from a US Treasury's perspective is a bit limited, personally. And I think, I mean, the market sort of was using that as a proxy for the RWA space, and that's why we saw it really climb during the bear market. It was sort of like a bear market phenomenon. Now I sort of see like the RWA's space expanding into tokenization of assets. Like we've seen Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, talking about bringing commodities and different assets, TradFi assets on chain. And now that we've got this very pro crypto US government, obviously that's what they've been telling us, and it's sort of yet to be seen what they actually bring to the table in terms of like good policy and that sort of stuff. But I do see RWAs coming back personally. And in the West, we actually really underappreciate our access to, being able to buy things, like being able to buy financial assets. Like, as an Australian or based in the US or wherever in the West, you can get access to a lot of different assets very easily through, a brokerage. Whereas if you go somewhere like a developing country or a country with more stringent capital controls, you cannot get access to US stocks, for example. And this, is a phenomenon that a lot of people aren't really aware of if they only lived in the West. And I think bringing financial assets on chain just really democratizes this access, and there's a lot of demand for it. So that's sort of my opinion on the RWA space, and I do think we get a resurgence in 2025.
Yeah, Larry Fink was pretty vocal, coming out on CNBC and the likes of these shows, stressing the importance of real world assets. I'm not sure there, Jody, if you were keen to chime in.
Yeah, this one I don't think will get real tangible tokenization of real world assets into 2025. We need law reform and tax reform to remove the legal and tax friction from these, because typically tokenizing something could turn it into a derivative or a financial product. And so existing digital currency exchanges, it goes to the question of they can't list financial products unless they have an Australian markets license, which is something that like the big stock exchanges have for you to trade equities and on the index funds. And a markets license, there's a real big tension worldwide that crypto markets don't behave the same way as traditional equities. And so nor should the same compliance approach apply to the market operators. So until we get resolution on what an appropriate markets license is to allow for the listing and also the secondary market trading of the tokenized real world assets or the fractions of them, we actually don't have the legal infrastructure ready for it yet, in my view. And I think that's going to take at least 2 to 3 years, not just from an Australian perspective, but from the international securities and markets law standard setters to get comfort to be able to do these things. But despite that, we've got satellite jurisdictions like Switzerland and even out of Caymans and some of the tax or regulatory haven type countries that are allowing for these things to be issued. But then there's the separate, frictional problem of actually how many centralized exchanges or labs companies that are supporting the decentralized exchanges can effectively support them without it being taken down. So I give it a good 3 years really before it takes off.
Yeah, well, thanks. That's a very, very good insight. And hopefully, time goes fast, and probably a next bull run narrative as well that has a lot of legs to it. We got a few Q&A questions coming in here about past narratives. So I'm not sure if any of you guys were into the metaverse narrative that really took the space, back in 2021. Of course, Meta rebranded, and that was absolutely massive. Do we think the metaverse narrative is coming back? That's a core question here. I'm not sure, Ray, if that's something you've been following or anyone else wants to take it.
Yeah, the metaverse it's such a interesting topic because I definitely feel like I was pretty into the space when it first came about, and I was pretty skeptical at the start then, over time when it continued to grow and obviously had that big peak, everyone was an expert and, knew all about the metaverse. But I think now as it's kind of come back down, we're seeing a lot more people either building in the space, and you can see the people that truly want to be there and are trying to add to it and make it legitimate. And then you can see the ones that were in there maybe just for, trying to make some money. So I think the metaverse still has a while to come, in my personal opinion, because I think it's an education piece. It's hard to explain to, your parents or your grandparents, like what it is and what the benefits of it can be just to the normal person. And I think once it gets over that and it can tick that box, that's when we'll see more growth from that space.
Yeah, we were actually had a ongoing event with the team where we would actually meet in one of these games on the Oculus to play, which was a great experience. The thing was that I always tell people with the metaverse narrative is that it's actually really, really difficult as we talk about AI, just from a technology standpoint. You still have these, clunky, headsets and, it's not really the best experience yet. So I think that's what a lot of people found out in 2021, that, hey, they got in there and they're like, what is there to do? The games aren't there. The interactions aren't there. Sometimes you're playing games with kids. No one wants to play games with kids. So it was just a really bad user experience. I think that will still take quite a few years to really mature. So it's one that I probably don't expect to come roaring back really anytime soon, to my dismay. Another one is DeSci. I'm not sure any of you guys on the panel have followed the DeSci movement. A lot of these different so-called decentralized science coins that have popped up, kind of like crowdsourcing scientific development. You kind of get upside. I reckon maybe, Joni, this is in your wheelhouse too, from a lawyer's perspective, because I can imagine that the enforcement of intellectual property with a DAO would be absolutely horrendous.
Well, it's a funny thing because most academics, even though it's their hard work and you would think it's their intellectual property, they're usually engaged by university, that the university is the one that really receives the research rankings and credits for their work. I mean, they're acknowledged as author, which is what a patent would do as well. It acknowledges the authors, but usually it's owned by a company. So I think the movement to decentralize the ownership of academic and intellectual contributions to our world is a good thing. And there's deep discontent with the power structures that have the capital to commission the work and therefore own the product of that work and the IP. And so what we're seeing, not just in science, but in a number of industry verticals, that there's this desire to use blockchain technology for its democratization benefits or promised benefits, that it can engage a community so that through coordination and collective action, each person that contributes can own a chunk of something that benefits the world, rather than the traditional notion of corporates or university monoliths continuing to command that work. I really align with the Web3 fundamentals, and I think it's a good direction. But I do think that we do value the monoliths and the institutions that can fund a lot of the good work that is being done. So I like that we're moving in a direction and we're more empowered by this technology to do it. But I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm glad that both exist at the moment.
I think that's a great place to wrap up, because my mind just goes to people probably going to talk about longevity. A lot of this stuff is just going to be filtering its way through a lot of like biotech. And I probably think that probably the left side of my brain is just like, people are going to look for exposure to that. That's probably why some of these tokens may see, catch a narrative in that aspect. So covered a lot here: real world assets, DeSci, deep in layer ones. So a lot going on. And I think that just shows a testament to where the space is at, and that there's a lot of narratives out there and a lot of stuff being built that I think is unlike past cycles. So thanks for you guys for joining. And I think we got Ben here to wrap things up.
Guys, that was absolutely epic. Thank you so much. Can you just give a quick, where can people find you? That topic was super in depth. There's so much, more to talk about. Just quickly for the audience, where can they find you? Where they can follow your stuff or the businesses that you're running?
I'll jump in. So I'm at cryptotaxcalculator.io. We make your crypto taxes super easy, and you can find me at paddy.ai on Twitter. See my AI takes.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that for CoinSpot. I won't really plug much of my personal stuff, mainly just the business CoinSpot. You can find us across all X, Facebook, Instagram, everything like that. Yeah, give us a follow. We're pretty active on there, and we post a lot of awesome content.
I'm at BADASL, www.bdasl.com, or I'm mostly on LinkedIn. Just find me at Joni Pirovich. I think there's only one of me, so you shouldn't have too much trouble.
Amazing. And obviously, Nick, senior analyst at Collective Shift. So, folks, thank you so much. That was epic.